Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control. Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control now. Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control. Johnny's got a problem, he's out of control. Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control. Got static on the brain, out of control now. Johnny's got a problem and he's out of control. Got static on the brain.
Welcome, one and all, to Jughead's basement. But I am not in my basement. I am touring a puppet show. So I am live from the Sleep-In Hotel near the public urinal in Jacksonville, North Carolina. And my radio crew of one, Jeremy, is located in Auburn, Illinois. So we'll see how this Midwestern and Southern internet holds up live. Tonight, we will be exploring the 1984 release of Repo Man, the movie, and the soundtrack. If you are listening to this show live, please, if you have a story to tell relating to this movie, or if you have a question about my own relationship with Repo Man and punk music, please request my friendship through Skype at Jughead's Basement, one word. You can also instant message me on Facebook at John Jughead Pearson. This may be a long one, folks, so buckle up for safety, and let's begin our journey into Repo Man.
What you got in the trunk?
Oh, you don't want to look in there.
With Ken, in high school, the absurdity was natured by puns. One day we were crawling under the tables in the library, and the librarian asked us what we were doing. And Ken said, "We were told to look under the tables." "For what?" she said. Then I replied, "Content. I'm on a desperate search for content." With Jim and Pat, it was what you could get away with and still be trusted. One day, a teacher handed Jim the keys to the theater to retrieve a book. He ran as fast as he could past the theater. He hopped into a car, drove down the street to a hardware store, had copies of the keys made, and got back in time with the book in hand without raising any suspicion. With the key, he snuck in at night and stole 3 solid bricks of steel. "Why did you steal steel?" I asked. "Exactly," is how he began his answer. "They're steel. How often in my life will I have the opportunity to steal even 1 solid brick of steel?" I could not argue. Pat walked into a bank and rolled up a 10-foot-long welcome mat and walked out with it while the security guard looked on, confused, but unwilling to believe it was at all out of the ordinary. With Matt, it was good looks, women, and pure absurdity. The less sense, the better. Where has all the time gone? Over there? No. Over there? No. Over there? Once a girl came up to me and placed a small circular sticker of a bulldog on my Adam's apple. I left it there for days. I even covered it when I showered. Each day when someone would ask what it meant, Matt and I added a word to its existence. Eventually the sticker's name grew to be called Bull-Shaped Rock and Roll Tweezers. And no matter what, in the future, if anybody said Bull-Shaped Rock and Roll Tweezers, you had to drop whatever you were doing and clap. I got him in trouble in a bowling alley once. I said the magic words just as he was swinging backwards for the ball release, and he let go of it and sent it flying backwards towards us, smashing the plastic backing on one seat. Matt and I saw Repo Man the night it came out, and it changed the course of our lives. Amongst our love for Oingo Boingo, the Ramones, and the Feelies, because of this movie, we added Fear, the Circle Jerks, and this infectious punk sound dominated our lives for many years. Repo Man fit so perfectly into me and Matt's sensibilities. We were so inspired that we started an absurd, nonsensical high school sketch group called The Philosophy of Plato Shrimp. For us, its influence had nothing to do with suburban boredom or rebellion. We demanded excitement out of ourselves and our friends. It was the absurdity that rocked our bull-shaped worlds. Tonight, you will hear truths and lies, sad stories, cases of rebellion, blind translations, sad and riotous explorations. No matter the diversity of its impact, this movie, Repo Man, and its incredible Southern Californian soundtrack has had a lasting effect on the life of all my friends you will hear tonight. Tonight's radio show is dedicated to the memory of my friend, Matt Nelson.
With his fool's gold stacked up all around him, from a killing in the market on the war, Julie left King Midas there as they bound him in his counting house where thought he heard the echoes of a penny whistle band and the laughter from a distant caravan and the brightly painted line of circus wagons in the sand fading through the door into summer.
Later in this program, I will reveal why I have started the program with the song The Door into Summer, if you don't know this already. If you want to speak with me tonight, once again, you must send a permission to join my Skype at Jughead's Basement. Then when I see your name pop up, hopefully sometime in the next hour and a half, I will contact you via Skype and see what you have to ask or say. If you are downloading this or streaming this not live, you can listen to the program every third Friday of the month, 10 p.m. Central Time. The idea of the show for me is to correspond with people live, to share our views on different albums and movie soundtracks. So, tune in and share your thoughts. This program will always be dictated by the order of the songs as they appear on the record featured on each episode. My good friends have spent much time contemplating the effect of Repo Man on their lives, and they have all chosen specific songs that spoke directly to them. We will hear their pre-recorded voices in the exact order of the soundtrack, starting with Repo Man, a song written and performed by Iggy Pop, but our piece is performed by Oobleck Theater co-founder Danny Thompson.
I saw the film Repo Man in 1984, and only today am I considering that odd, long 30 seconds of silence at the opening. You see a corporate logo with its blue earth spinning in silence, no famous Universal Studios fanfare, just silence, and the titles begin. Bold red on black, Michael Nesmith presents Harry Dean Stanton, Emilio Estevez, and with the screen once again black, the sound comes in with click, 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 click drumsticks counting off the beat. It's the click of a pilot light on a gas stove. But the sound isn't clean. You can hear the recording studio buzzing and heavily amped fingers finding their place on the guitar fret. And then slam! Hard pounding chords with that pilot light click, 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 still going, and the guitar pounding away all the silence in the theater. The drummer explodes, and the grinding guitar and the thumping bass ignite, and it's like some surf band getting the electric chair while playing something by an old 1950s guitar monster. On the screen, there's a road map in sick computer monitor green on black. Los Alamos. But every measure of the song moves us 100 miles westward towards LA. And it is so fitting. This is a driving song, literally. This song will be on every road tape I will ever make. The movie begins, but I'm still thinking about the title song. The first scene is funny, but I am still buzzing about that title song. If I owned a theater, I would stop the movie, rewind it, and play that song 3 or 4 more times or until I get sick of it. But that doesn't happen. The movie is okay. The soundtrack is uninteresting. Just punk songs. I don't know punk in 1984. Harry Dean Stanton is okay, but he's better in a dozen other films. Tracy Walter is funny. Plate of Shrimp. John Wayne's a fag. Cans of food that say food. Let's get sushi and not pay. But 90 minutes later, and I'm still thinking about that song. The movie comes to its end with a car, glowing green, flying off far above LA. Glowing that green of the sick computer monitor road map. The end credits roll. And then the click, 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 click comes back. Yes, and Steve Jones from the Sex Pistols starts grinding again. And I swear it is different this time, and it was. The guitar is exploring. It's left that 50s chord thing back at the diner with Buddy Holly. Now it's trippy and almost beautiful. The guitar snarls and goes into cruise control. And the chords sink lower and lower and lower still until they find Iggy, already miles down the road, already in motion. He is riding on a concrete slab, Iggy on the slab at the morgue, but still in motion, as if motion were a state that even the dead can share. He is using his head as an ashtray. And 26 years later, that line is still always with me. These lines are great, but the lyrics are crap. Each line flies by unconnected to the last. The lines are flipped out like playing cards in random order. Iggy is tearing his way through old high school notebooks, reading off and ripping out the pages, and they're flying everywhere. No time for concepts to take root. This song is already on the horizon before each line ends. The Doppler effect of a drunken, inarticulate teenager, and it is wonderful. And then a break from the lyrics. Iggy drops out and is quickly replaced by a clack-clack. It's the clack-clack of the railroad at the end of the block from my childhood. Clack-clack like loose rails under a fast-rolling train. Years later, I hear the story of the recording session. It was quick and dirty. The band is in and out in 20 minutes, leaving Iggy with 2 grams of coke up his nose and a mouth too numb for use. He returns the next day with new lyrics. I'll make you eat till you vomit is now I'll turn you into a toadstool. Thank God. And at the end, looking for the joke. The song flies apart in different directions. The guitar escapes with psychedelic velocity, like Robbie Krieger sweating on speedballs. The drummer drives on, but Iggy leaps out of the car, running and pissing his way through the desert, looking for the joke. Still, always looking for the joke. Still, always.
Thank you, Danny Thompson. Well done. When I told a few other contributors that Danny preferred the title song to the movie itself, most of them nearly lost their shit. But I thought it made for a pleasant amount of animosity. Now we shall dive into the next piece. Black Flag, founded by the most odd-sounding guitarist I've ever heard, Greg Ginn, who also ran SST Records, was one of the first hardcore bands to create their own independent navigation of the music scene, booking their own tours and living out of vans. Of course, this band spawned a career for one frontman known as Henry Rollins. The song in the movie is TV Party, and here with a review on this track is one of Chicago's Renaissance performers and directors, one of the original founders and members of Factory Theater, Barrel of Monkeys, and 500 Clown. Here is Molly Brennan.
In 1984, I saw Ghostbusters, Gremlins, 2010, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Neverending Story, Conan the Destroyer, and 1984. I did not see Terminator, Nightmare on Elm Street, Purple Rain, Revenge of the Nerds, Toxic Avenger, 16 Candles, or Suburbia. However, once those all came out on VHS, they became reference points for much of my teenagedom, specifically Terminator and Suburbia. Similarly, I did not see Repo Man when it was released. I wonder if any theaters in New Hampshire even showed it. And even when I did see it, it was long after I'd worn through 2 cassettes of the soundtrack. I didn't actually see Repo Man until 1986. 1986, sophomore year of high school, November 3rd, Monday. I walked into geometry. A psychic hiss emanated from a portion of the class. Soundless, but I could hear it streaming through the narrowed eyes of half a dozen girls in big hair and acid wash. And the song played in my head when I encountered this silent and screaming aggression.
We're gonna have a TV party tonight. We're gonna have a TV party, all right!
And I pointed my chin down and grinned, peering up through my bangs as I slid into my seat, legs straddled out like Han Solo at the cantina, taking up as much space as my skinny arms and legs could. I practiced this posture, just as I practiced my ease at addressing whomever was threatening to beat the shit out of me after school. No one ever beat me up, by the way. They never even showed up to carry out the threat. I owe it to my acting, and to keeping Black Flag playing in my head.
Anything else? We don't wanna know. We're dedicated to our favorite
it, though? They had a good reason to hate me today. Friday night, I had fucked them over. I had really fucked them over. And I had all of the arrogance and confidence that a 90-pound asthmatic 15-year-old in love could hold. The Friday before was the setting of the coup. It was a Halloween dance, and I went with the popular girls. How? I had the inside scoop on the new boy, who liked comics and punk rock and skateboarding. My freak status had, since the beginning of the school year, become an asset, and I was suddenly a consultant on Robbie, invited to hang out with the class royalty to inform them what might make them seem interesting to the tall kid with the sideways haircut. My job was to talk to him on the phone about Tony Hawk, Dark Knight Returns, the comic release, and Who's Got the 10.5, while Melinda and cohorts listened on the other end. I knew I was being used. I could have cared less. I got to talk with Robbie for hours, and I had a fail-safe inside of me. I wasn't doing this because I liked him, but man, did I like him. But he started dating Melinda. It was killing me, but I still was talking on the phone while she listened. The last conversation overheard by Melinda and friends was the one I had been practicing if someday there was someone who might be interested. It started with him asking me if I'd seen Repo Man. My heart pounded as I tried to make my monologue sound unrehearsed, and I was giddy with my realization that I was communicating something vital, not just to this boy, but to the eavesdroppers on the other line. I haven't seen it, but I love the soundtrack. I love Black Flag. TV Party is funny, and it's smart, and it's subversive. I paused. Big word. Hot and scary, like my boots and haircut, I thought. You know, most people hear it one way, but it's really about something else. They're talking about how awesome it is to get wasted and watch TV, but when the TV is broken, they have nothing to talk about. They're shallow and they're boring and all they do is watch TV. So people listen to TV Party and they think, yeah, this is awesome. I like all those shows. This song is about me. But they miss that it's making fun of them. Robbie was laughing. Oh, yeah, he said. Those shows all suck, too, he said. Totally, I laughed back. And I thought of our voyeurs and how I was being subversive, too, and that it was going over their heads. So, are you going to the dance? Asked Robbie. I don't know. Are you? Yeah, I might. I was definitely going, by the way. Fast forward to the dance. I won't go into the teenage hormonal rage or the build-up or how we dressed for Halloween, but suffice it to say, Robbie asked me to dance, and we made out. Me for the first time. And a teacher had to separate us, and Melinda's world fell apart. And I was not just immediately relegated back to freak, but two-faced bitch as well. And for months to come, I sailed easily through the psychic hiss of my enemies because I, at 15, had my first boyfriend, and he liked the stuff I liked. Robbie and I left the dance, and we kissed some more in his truck, and the Repo Man soundtrack was in the tape deck. Later he confessed it was because he was hoping I'd wind up in his truck and wanted to impress me by having my favorite song queued up. Mission accomplished. And the next night, we watched Repo Man. And I do not remember it at all.
Thank you, Molly. That is one of Chicago's most tough chicks I have ever met. This next track, the song Institutionalized, takes place as the background noise as Otto tries to have sex at a party with his British girlfriend, actor Vonetta McGee. Before doing the dirty, she sends Otto away to get them more cans of beer, in the movie called Beer. When he returns, she's already going at it with the guy who she will soon be doing crimes with, actor Dick Rude, who in 2006 in real life produced a documentary on Joe Strummer. Institutionalized is performed by the band Suicidal Tendencies. This song is many of my friends' favorites, of the entire Repo Man soundtrack. But I just could never warm up to this song or the band. The Suicidal Tendencies, led by bandana-wearing singer and songwriter Mike Muir, M-U-I-R, were voted Worst Band, Biggest Assholes in Flipside magazine in 1982, which, in my mind, gives them a little street cred. Yet, I have to admit that this next piece forced me to see their songwriting in a whole new positive light, thanks to my favorite director, writer, performer, Steve Walker.
Sometimes I try to write things, and it just doesn't turn out the way I want it to, and I get writer's block, and then I try to revise it, and it still doesn't sound good. It's like, I try to remember that time when I was young in the 1980s, and I just can't remember anything. I need time to figure out how to do this audio piece for the radio show, and there's always John there going, "Hey Steve, I noticed you haven't recorded yours yet. You need to maybe finish it. You'll probably feel a lot better after you finish it, so why don't you finish it?" And I go, "Yeah, I know, I was supposed to be done with this thing a week ago, and everybody else's is done, and you've probably already posted about me doing it on Facebook. And I'm going to look like an asshole in front of everybody." And John goes, "Okay, be that as it may. I have to get this radio show done, so when can you record it?" And I go, "No, look, I'll get it done. Some of the memories the song brings up are not necessarily that which I want to share with the general public. But he just keeps emailing me. He just keeps emailing me, and the deadline goes by. The song is called Institutionalized. Writing about it has given me hives. I don't have anything to say. Wish my memory hadn't gone away. I'm not a writer. Institutionalized. Nothing but a fraud. Institutionalized. Why did I agree to do this? Institutionalized. Once I was stuck in an institution. Maybe that could be my solution. Although I hate autobiographical writing, ultimately I'll have to talk about myself. Repo Man came out in 1984. I was a junior in high school. I saw it at the theater. It was one of the funniest movies I had ever seen. The soundtrack was at times even funnier. It was also one of the great compilations of 80s hardcore and punk that was widely available. So I think that for a lot of kids, myself included, it was their first exposure to that kind of music. It was fast and hilarious. In fact, now that I think about it, the title track may be my first exposure to Iggy Pop, and probably Jonathan Richman via the Burning Sensations. I don't know. Again, my memory isn't that good. It was certainly the first time I and most others heard Suicidal Tendencies. Institutionalized was the most hardcore song on the record and probably the funniest. There's that part in the middle of the song where the narrator's mother comes in the room and accuses him of being on drugs, and he asks her for a Pepsi, and she wouldn't give it to him. Just one Pepsi. That was fucking hysterical. Just a Pepsi. I'll get to the part where I talk about me. Need to put it in context, see. Also, I am very lazy and my memory is quite hazy. Repo Man soundtrack, Institutionalized. One of my favorites, Institutionalized. Still have the vinyl, Institutionalized. Now punk is an institution, selling Pepsi a real solution. Punks make musicals for Broadway. They have kids to feed, so it's okay. I guess I had a hard time writing this because this song, while being very funny, also resonates with a lot of kids. A couple years later, my parents would come into my room, where I just swallowed 2 bottles of antidepressants. They took me to the hospital. I got my stomach pumped, drank some carbon solution, and spent some time in an institution, the mental ward of the hospital. Up until that time, Institutionalized was the closest thing that I related to when it came to the subject matter. Later, I would read Frederick Exley's A Fan's Notes, and that also rang true of my time there. A Fan's Notes is considered one of the finest novels in the English language, but if you do a juxtaposition of both writers, Mike Muir and Fred Exley, they really aren't that far from each other. From Exley, in the chapter Straw Hat for a Madman, quote, I had been in the hospital once before, a private one to be sure, and had come to understand that there was in the treatment of the patients, I had come to call them inmates, certain overtones of punishment, some subtle, some not so subtle. We had failed our families by our inability to function properly in society, as good a definition of insanity as any. Our families, tears compounded by self-pity in their eyes, had pleaded with the doctors to give us the goals that would set our legs in motion again. The goals, a wife and family, a vice presidency, a Cadillac, varied only with the imperceptibility, a bland vision of the relative. End quote. And then you have Mike Muir. Quote, what are you trying to say? I'm crazy? Well, I went to your schools. I went to your churches. I went to your institutional learning facilities. So how can you say I'm crazy? They say they're going to fix my brain, alleviate my suffering and my pain. But by the time they fix my head, mentally I'll be dead. I'm not crazy. You're the one that's crazy. You're driving me crazy. They stick me in an institution, said it was the only solution, to give me the needed professional help, to protect me from the enemy myself. End quote. But even Exley couldn't come up with an ending as succinct as doesn't matter. I'll probably get hit by a car anyway.
Thank you, Steve. Perhaps because of the British influence of Alex Cox, born in Babington, England, moved to Los Angeles, Repo Man had quite an effect on audiences overseas, which also helped the wildfire spreading of American hardcore worldwide. The movie definitely had a style that was beyond what most movies were doing in America at the time. To speak to its international appeal is journalist and novelist Graham Ray, based on the Circle Jerk's second track called Coup d'Etat, which my friend Matt Nelson used to sing as Coup d'Etat, Coup d'Etat.
A lot of people don't realize what's really going on. They view life as a bunch of unconnected incidents and things. They don't realize that there's this, like, lattice of coincidence that lays on top of everything. Let me give you an example, show you what I mean. Suppose you're thinking about a plate of shrimp. Suddenly somebody will say, like, plate, or shrimp, or plate of shrimp, out of the blue, no explanation. No point in looking for one either. It's all part of cosmic unconsciousness.
I was a huge fan of Alex Cox's 1984 movie Repo Man back in the late 80s, early 90s, back in my old Scottish hometown of Falkirk, when I was in my late teens, early 20s. A friend of mine, Davy Blair, gave me a copy of the UK release on CIC video for my 21st birthday. Back then I loved American punk music and movies, and collected stuff on VHS like the Penelope Spheris films, or even films with punk elements like Return of the Living Dead. Punks versus zombies, what more could you want? But Repo Man was just special somehow. Maybe it's because it was directed by an Englishman in Los Angeles and has a slightly skewed and European take on America. It's a funny, loud, anarchic, rude, rowdy, raucous movie with a lot of carefully placed in-jokes. The plate of shrimp sign, for example. The soundtrack album is a riotous and intelligent mix of hardcore punk and new wave, and I used to own the much played and scratched vinyl back in the Jumping Sonics day. The weirdest riff, to me, is in the extras on the DVD, when the excellent Harry Dean Stanton hands a business card of his across that bears the name IG Farben, the German company that manufactured the poisonous gas Zyklon B during World War II. It's the name of Dennis Hopper's character in the next Alex Cox film, Straight to Hell, and I still can't quite figure it out. I remember Emilio Estevez, who plays the young main character Otto, saying in an interview that he had been down on his brother, not literally, Charlie Sheen, for being into punk music a year or two before, but now here he was, borrowing Charlie's records in preparation for the movie. I suspect that Charlie Sheen may be the only person Repo Man ever made complete sense to, what with his advanced mindset. There was also a UK TV version of the movie released with different scenes and stupid dialogue to substitute for expletives. Flip you, melon farmer, being my own personal fave. In the early 90s, I attended a Bad Religion gig in Newcastle in England and met Greg Hetson. He is in Bad Religion and also in the Circle Jerks, who do 2 songs on the Repo Man soundtrack, the excellent Coup d'Etat and When the Shit Hits the Fan. They also appear in the film as a band who has abandoned their punk roots to play cheesy lounge hits in clubs. I asked Hetson if the version of the Scroungy Lounge Lizard song was the only one, as I had thought there might be a faster version available. He told me there was only one. In 2002, I also met Alex Cox himself. He was at the Edinburgh International Film Festival, premiering his film Revenger's Tragedy starring Eddie Izzard. I was covering the festival for American Cinematographer magazine, for whom I was writing at the time, and I made my way along to the Sheraton Hotel on Lothian Road. It's a swanky hotel right next to the film house, which is where most of the films are screened. Cox was doing a photo session for the film, and I was wearing a Repo Man t-shirt given to me by a Screechin' Weasel fan I met online, DW. Cox came out and had some photos taken outside the hotel for the press. He was instantly recognisable, quite apart from the agitated yappy cloud of self-important PR people hovering around him. He's in Repo Man briefly as a gas station attendant, and he stands out in a crowd. Cox was wearing a kilt and had the knobbliest knees I had ever seen on a person in my life. He grinned in delight and pointed at my t-shirt when he saw it. A crowd of people went into the hotel for a press conference downstairs, and I walked down next to the director, quoting him some of the movie. I pointed out the reference to Dr. Benway being paid in the hospital near the end, with this being the notorious medical deviant butcher from William S. Burroughs' Naked Lunch. I also quoted the "ordinary fucking people I hate 'em" line, which I loved, and he told me it was a line from a real Repo Man. I was also horrified to feel my brain freeze and to hear myself just saying making sycophantic crap like, "I just love that film." I shook his hand for the film and attended the press conference and then Revenger's tragedy itself later on that night. But I had still had my homage-paying moment in the mirage-flickering celluloid punk storm sun and went home happy and satisfied. If you ever watch the extras section of the Repo Man DVD, it has Cox revisiting the film decades later to try and figure out exactly what the hell it's about, because even he himself doesn't quite know. Is it a religious and political satire, a comedy film, a spunky punk explosion? It's all of these things and more or less. Repo Man is all things to all people and everything to some. It's all part of the cosmic unconsciousness, and will continue to be so until Otto and Miller come back from the final frontier and fill us all in on just what the hell their wee celluloid adventure in the early 80s was all about and where they've been since then.
Coup d'etat! Coup d'etat!
Coup d'etat.
Coup d'etat! The government gets a bad throat. Sudden burst, major stroke, overrun, new comes in.
Coup d'etat.
Give me a bomb.
A Molotov.
It's a coup d'etat! Generalissimus, let them chop. Step on a line, next in a block. Armies marching through the streets. Trust no shot, trust will meet. Coup d'etat! Coup d'etat!
A push from the left and a shove from the right. It's all planned out. We'll do it tonight.
Push the president in his white. Hoping for ransom or take their lives. Attack their embassy. They are our enemies. The president, they smoke cigars. Anyone he does not like,
He shoots or puts behind bars.
coup d'etat! Coup d'etat!
Circle Jerks is one of my favorite bands, and as you could see, I have a hard time even contemplating cutting those songs short. By the way, Greg Hetson did in fact lie to Graham, or something of the sort, because I informed Graham that When the Shit Hits the Fan is done punk style on the record called Golden Shower of Hits. And also, Waldo's Hawaiian Holiday, a graphic novel, is actually the sequel to Repo Man. Alex Cox could not get permission to use any of the characters from the original Repo Man movie, even though he wrote it and filmed it. The studio owns those rights. If you Google Waldo's Hawaiian Holiday, you'll be able to read a couple chapters from that graphic novel. This next intelligent man always seems to weasel his way into my projects, or perhaps it's more like I drag him into my projects. Dramaturg and world traveler Evan Hanover. This time he has also brought aboard fellow employees Allison Cohn and Brandy Parker with their investigation into the Spanish song, and I'll try to pronounce this, El Clavo y la Cruz by the Plebs.
El clavo de noche nos habla con bote, nos hablan sus manos, noche tras noche, noche tras noche, sanando con carros, vatos nochalos, la cruz en sus brazos, por vida con Safo, la cruz en sus brazos, por vida con Safo, camina por calles, buscando sin luz, el lugar de su cruz, de su cruz, de su cruz. The nail of night, They tell us with their boot, they tell us with their hands. Night after night, night after night. Cleansed in the journey, boys not hoodlums. The cross in their arms, a lifetime slipping. The cross in their arms, a lifetime slipping. Walking the streets, searching the dark for the place with his cross, his cross, his cross.
Okay, so neither of us have seen this movie, so what does this mean?
What does this mean?
Okay, so obviously there's people who are trying to struggle. We know that some of this language is sort of Chicano gangster slang, so presumably it takes place somewhere where there is pressure, probably to go to the gangster side.
It sounds like the nail of night, the nail in the cross, is about how nighttime comes. The nail of night brings suffering. They get beatings, they get hit with the boot, they get hit with the hand, every single night. And through all this, they're somehow cleansed, and they're just kids.
One, we don't quite know why the cross is in their hands, but I think the lifetime slipping, are they clutching to life, or is life actually just slipping away? And then walking the streets, searching the dark for the place.
The place with his cross, the home of his cross, could also be the interpretation.
So that's obviously some sort of sanctuary, some sort of place of salvation that would take them away from all of this.
The place where Jesus could be found, or salvation, or hope, searching the dark. It sounds very hopeless.
So there's a line called Sanando con carros.
Sanando con carros, which sanando can mean making healthy with cars.
Cleansing,
purifying with cars.
We had initially, before we IMDb'd, had visions of sort of the death march of Christ taking the cross.
The death march of Christ, but in every single night these boys relive the sort of suffering and pain and risk and danger.
With literal cars.
Even while stripping cars.
Just like Christ would have wanted.
Christ. So they carry the slipping cross throughout the night as they're beaten. And they suffer, and they're searching for salvation, looking for the place.
And so, this makes Vatos no Chalos more interesting. Are they just boys doing it, but don't want to become hoodlums, or is there a tension there between living a life of rightness and continuing a life of innocence and fighting off becoming a hoodlum, which seems to many of them their destiny, or is it about that sort of process and it's their instinct, sort of their guilty instinct to clutch those crosses and knowing life is going to slip away, but actually desiring that end? Or
is it that every night their suffering turns them back into boys? Their innocence comes back to them through the suffering because they're beaten night after night and they have to carry the cross.
So that's our interpretation. Coming to you from Chicago, 3 people who have never seen Repo Man, only one of whom speaks Spanish, and thanks very much.
Pablo Picasso Was Never Called an Asshole was originally written and sung by Boston-born Jonathan Richman. The track in the movie was covered by the Burning Sensations, who, besides this song, only had one other hit. But this hit is still one of my favorite songs to dance to. It's called Belly of the Whale.
A nice breeze blows in whenever the big fella cracks a grin and when the time and the place is right. We sit down, sip some bouillabaisse. A little, I'm gonna have me a little fun. I got a candle I can get a lot of reading done. Somewhere the sun is shining. On this world
I could not even consider this program without asking our next performer to write something, especially since he is one of the biggest Jonathan Richman fans, and also because he has the largest collection of movies and music sprawled throughout his entire home. Now we have Neo-Futurist founder, director, writer, performer Greg Allen presenting a piece that will boggle your mind, and once downloaded, may need a few more listens to separate truth from fiction, if there is such a thing.
Some people try to pick up girls, get called an asshole. This never happened to Pablo Picasso. Why, he could walk down the street. Girls could not resist his stare.
Contemplating the asshole, breaking the code of Repo Man.
Pablo Picasso was never called an asshole.
Burning Sensations' rendition of the Jonathan Richman song Pablo Picasso appears in the Alex Cox debut film Repo Man at the 26-minute, 16-second mark. It is heard as Otto, played by Emilio Estevez, drives down the street in his recently repossessed red 1976 Cadillac Eldorado. The song selection for the soundtrack at this particular juncture in the movie speaks to a deeper lattice of coincidence which runs throughout the film. In this sequence, Otto spots Layla, played by Olivia Barash, for the first time as she runs down the sidewalk beside him, like one of Picasso's much-heralded loping saltimbanques. Otto is so struck by her cubist Iberian beauty that he steers directly into a collection of garbage cans piled on the street corner. The resulting splash of trash is not, as it first appears, merely a random array of miscellaneous refuse, but actually a very carefully crafted reproduction of Picasso's seminal painting Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. As noted in Cox's DVD commentary, this only is apparent if viewed from above, vertically, as if by a hovering spacecraft or perhaps a ubiquitous god. However, Cox wisely chooses to shoot the scene horizontally, keeping the heavy-handedness tantamount to a steel-fisted female government agent at bay. Otto is then reproached by an obvious doppelganger for Picasso's disapproving mother, Dorothy Bartlett playing the irate English dustbin lady. She repeatedly berates Otto to pick up the garbage, the detritus, the rubbish of capitalist society, but Picasso/Otto refuses, leaving her his own personal Guernica. Instead, Otto picks up Layla and, like Picasso, is never called an asshole. He quickly lures her into the back of his repo car for a little abstract expressionism, surely penetrating her dorsal region, her anal cavity, thus making the musical anatomical analogy complete. Otto is not an asshole, a bottom. He, like Picasso, is a top. We can therefore presume Layla's fate will be similar to that of Picasso's other mountings, his connubial conquests. Like Picasso's wives, Layla, after Otto's death, will inevitably hang herself or shoot herself through the head. Cox is clearly aware that the very name Pablo Picasso, when eliminating double consonants, becomes an exact anagram of Los Alamos, the site of the first atomic explosion, the source of Repo Man's apocalyptic vision, the instigating moment which propels the very genesis of the film itself, as well as the catastrophe which catapults the demise of Western civilization, the American nuclear family, and a couple of unfortunate travelers who are a little too anxious to find out what's in the trunk. Note, the aliens reside not in the Baptistian head of the car, but in the Beckettian end, the trunk. In this particular instance, the proverbial cart does lead the horse, not the other way around. To explore the asshole is to regret it, and those who wish to literally climb inside it will rejoin the gloomy womb-like environs of Picasso's blue period. As Bud, Harry Dean Stanton's character, proclaims in a near-rhyming couplet, "Goddamn dipshit Rodriguez gypsy dildo punks, I'll get your ass." Here, the dildo is literal, the ass figurative. The code of the Repo Man, as stated by Harry Dean Stanton, obviously reaches far beyond the simple narrative complex put forth in the film. Its basis in consumption, anatomy, and cosmology resonates far beyond the material domesticity of one's own VCR. As are assholes, God is invoked constantly as both creator and as Oppenheimer's Shiva, destroyer of worlds. Yet everyone aspires to his status. Kevin, played by Circle Jerks frontman Xander Schloss, parallels his social upward mobility with his celestial ascendance. He will move from fry cook to God in 2 short years. Duke, played by the aptly named Dick Rude, never reaches even this status, but dies miserably as a petty thief because of, as he blames them, society. Bud meets his fate on his knees rather than on his feet as the anti-Zapata, pleading to take the alternate route to meet his maker. It is the commies, not the Christians, who sow the seeds of their demise, keeping them from attaining their fated divinity, much less being canonized as patron saints of feeling 7-up. As Bud proclaims, only an asshole gets killed for a car, and that asshole does not have the name Pablo Picasso.
Pablo Picasso was never called an asshole.
In the end, it is not the rent-a-priest Reverend Larry who ascends to the heavens, nor the one-eyed lobotomized J. Frank Parnell, but the grinning, acid-guzzling Miller, who drives the '64 Chevy Malibu off to another dimension. Like getting sushi and not paying, Tracy Walters Miller may appear to be the red herring on this plate of shrimp, but his cosmic unconsciousness makes him the perfect candidate for canonical inclusion. J. Frank Parnell meets his end in a fiery blaze, like Norman Morrison's evil twin outside McNamara's Pentagon office. He must pay the piper for his Faustian pact with post-Euclidean geometry. In the director's special edition extended cut, Cox's alternate ending shows his true feelings for Reverend Larry as well. The Malibu's lasers sear not only his Bible, but also take his eyes. He is doomed to blindly walk the earth in search of a mohawk, like a new wave Oedipus. Thus, everybody's dead but Miller. Not the king of beers, but certainly better than Bud or Light. Like a television invented by Mayans, Miller wants nothing, makes nothing, shows nothing. He is a can of generic drink, the smelly air freshener you'll find in every car, incapable of driving, much less steering, the radiating, weightless Chevy Malibu of existence. He is a genius because he has never learned to drive. He is Iggy Pop's titular passenger, but from Roswell. He rides, and he rides, and he rides. He looks through his window. He sees the bright and hollow sky. He sees the city's ripped backsides. And everything was made for you and me. All of it is made for you and me, 'cause it just belongs to you and me. So let's take a ride and see what's mine. Singing, la la, la la, la, la la la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la, la 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 la.
Pablo Picasso was never called an asshole. I love you.
Alex Cox, the writer and director, handpicked the songs for Repo Man. He also got the idea for the movie from actually accompanying his neighbor on repossession jobs in the middle of the night. He called it legal thievery. He was a frequent audience member of LA's shows and, of course, was stunned by the audacity and talent of Leaving of the band Fear. As a matter of fact, Alex Cox's original idea was to have all the main characters played by the band members of Fear. But then producer Michael Nesmith, yes, you got it, from the Monkees, which is why I played the song Door into Summer. Michael Nesmith came along and helped produce it, which meant they had to get bigger stars. Emilio Estevez and Harry Dean Stanton were signed on. Another fan of Fear was Minutemen co-leader and bassist Mike Watt, who appears on a new record coming out this week, a complete cover of the Repo Man soundtrack. I had the honor of chatting with Mike Watt, who also agreed to another interview in November for my third radio episode about Double Nickels on the Dime, a classic double album by the Minutemen. Here to talk about Southern California punk and Repo Man is Mike Watt.
So before getting to your participation in the covering of the soundtrack, I wanted to chat briefly about the movie, The Repo Man. There was a documentary, The Decline of the Western Civilization, that came out prior to Repo Man. But for most of my friends in Chicago, the suburbs, the Repo Man was the first movie that we saw that introduced us to Southern California music. It was Minutemen. You had started touring a few years before that, so I was wondering why you have no participation in that movie, or were you aware of it when it was being filmed?
I think this guy, Alex Cox, knew about people in the scene. I think he went to film school at UCLA or something, so he was a SoCal guy, and he knew about the scene. But I don't know if he knew about Pedro punk rockers. I mean, our scene was very small.
I don't know if you even recall, was there any difference in crowd sizes for you guys that you know of from that movie?
Repo Man helped popularize punk with like straight people. I think so in some ways. I think a lot of people got turned on to the scene. You know, it was hard. Hardcore was finally actually getting kind of spread around by Black Flag touring. But I think movies like Decline and Repo Man helped get it out to, especially hardcore, with that part of punk. The 70s punk kind of went away with those scenes up in Hollywood and New York City, San Francisco. But the hardcore thing, I think, got spread by these kind of movies. There's younger people, as you notice, you know, at the gigs or acting in the movie. Well, you notice the bands aren't that young.
No.
Oh, no, because the first punk, before hardcore, the first punk is people from Glitter and Glam. It's older kind of people in a way. Not really kids yet. Art was more about kids. But what happened with that first scene was those people, they burned out pretty quick. So all that was left was this new bunch of people from the suburbs and, you know, the other towns. And I think part of it, was these kind of movies. But at first, it wasn't really on the radios, not even the college radios. I remember, for example, I was working at SST, and they had me using the name Spaceman, and I was calling up college stations, stuff from the CMJ magazine, you know, college music journal. And a lot of these guys were looking for jobs after college, kind of corporate pawn things at major labels. So they were playing stuff like Journey. I mean, this is on college radio things, early 80s. So I can't blame people for finding out about it through the movies, really. And maybe some little record stores, maybe a town like Chicago would have some happening record stores. But mainly it was Flag going around touring, building that scene that we all actually still tour on. And movies like Repo Man and maybe Decline. I think there was kind of an inferiority complex, too, about Southern California, because our scene was after New York City and even after San Francisco, and definitely behind London. So there's kind of wanting to show people that we had a real thing.
What I really admire about it is the humor, that it's very smart, and I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, we had a lot of funny punk bands.
What nurtured that in the Southern California scene, that idea? I mean, even the Minutemen had a lot of the lyrics are very odd, absurd.
Yeah, and if you see Fear and the Decline, they're doing like stand-up comedy. Dead Kennedys had a little bit of, in fact, I think they were a very campy band at first, especially. I think the whole thing, a big thing about Southern California was the irony, the ironic thing. For example, even with me, when I first met the guys from TSOL, you know, Jack and Roth, and, you know, these guys, good-looking jock guys with suntans, and it was like, God, why are you in this scene? This is full of ugly, weird people, you know, but could be in such like, I don't know, that there could be still alienation and not fitting in. And so I think that kind of irony found its way into the musical expression also. Another thing is, San Francisco's 7 miles across. it's kind of like a real city, a New York City for sure. Southern California is like this big vulcanized, it's really like 150 towns, and no one knows anyone. You know, they don't know anybody. Some people from the valley, some from Inland Empire, some from the beach. They all met up in Hollywood, but nobody was hardly from there. It was hard to play a lot of rock and roll clubs in the old days. That more than Square John's, rock and rollers really hated punk rock, and so you had to get ethnic halls or gay discos or VFW things, you know, where the people they didn't have prejudice because they didn't really know.
Our generation was the basement shows mostly.
Yeah, there was some of that too, but it was a lot of those ethnic calls and stuff that people just didn't know. You know, David Bowie from Johnny Rotten, so they didn't care. The rock and roll people really had some kind of weird chip on their shoulder in those days, so you couldn't really deal with them. So this guy in his town, he would know, you know, either the basement or the VFW or the Ukrainian, Polish hall, whatever. And his band would probably open up, and you'd probably conk at his pad when the gig was done. But a lot of the old days was a lot about people. But I do got to say that these movies like Repo Man and Decline, they were like kind of the more non-one-on-one, heard from a friend. It's more another way that people found out. Nowadays, I talk to people, and they'll say, yeah, my first experience was this movie. Joe at the Laundry Records, you know, putting out this tribute for Repo Man, because I always thought Fear was about kind of like punk rock Beethoven, and I really loved it. And always in my mind, I thought about that song, and here I got the chance to actually try to redefine it with my second man. I think to respect to Fear would be not just to copy them exactly, and try to do a version. I know Lee Ving, not really good friends, but through the scene and stuff, and always respected him. And he knows Pedro. He knows what kind of people we are. You know, we're Harvard people, and kind of work. And I think, I don't know for sure, you know, but I was hoping that maybe he would be proud of our version, that we would have respect not to copy him, but then also not make his song a bunch of shit.
If you want to learn more about Mike Watt, you should definitely see the documentary about the Minutemen called We Jam Econo. Also, Mike Watt has a pretty active blog that can be found at www.hootpage, that's HOOTPAGE.com. My favorite band on the Repo Man soundtrack is the Circle Jerks. The Circle Jerks' performance in Chicago was the first punk concert that Ben Weasel and I had ever seen together. Keith Morris, the singer's stage antics were spellbinding, swinging from the arms of the security guards and allowing stage divers to cause just the right amount of chaos. The Circle Jerks remain my favorite punk band to this very day. Here to talk about their lounge version of When the Shit Hits the Fan is theater and commercial actor and chef, founding member of Forks, F-O-U-R-K-S, which is a pop-up restaurant group currently working out of Survey and Andersonville. This is the one and only Matt O'Neill.
Doobie-doo wop wop say what yeah was the first line I heard that drew my attention. My older brother Sean was listening to it in the other room, and I listened to it, and you know, this sort of like unmotivated vocals listing off all these things that just kind of sounded like a drag. 5-pound blocks of cheese, bags of groceries, social securities. And I didn't really know what it was about. And, you know, the song's being accompanied by this sort of soggy guitar and this bad drum machine. And I didn't really know what it was about, but it was clear that something was being made fun of. And I went and I asked him what it was. He told me it was a song called When the Shit Hits the Fan by an LA hardcore band called the Circle Jerks. It was off the Repo Man soundtrack. And Repo Man was a movie I'd barely heard of. I saw a trailer for it once, half asleep at around midnight after Saturday Night Live. And but then one of my other older brothers, Pat, had seen it, I think, at the Fine Arts, which is an art house movie in the South Loop, and it kind of had a profound effect on him. He was the same age as Otto, and he was sort of becoming, very self-aware and angry in North Evanston, which is this where we grew up, and we just never. The older we got, the more we realized we just didn't really belong there. So he rented the movie and showed it to us, and I was in 8th grade at the time, and I laughed. On its surface, Repo Man's a really funny movie. But I knew there was something else going on there, and I just didn't quite... I always thought, oh yeah, it's funny. It's about this, kid who blah, blah, blah. But also, it's sort of about making fun of L.A. But there was also something more that I just couldn't quite put my finger on, but I knew that eventually I was just it was a disposition, it's something that I would just understand, more, and I was sort of destined to get it. And Repo Man is the first time. That's the first time that punk rock had been introduced to me. My knowledge of punk rock was bands from like London and New York, and it sort of came from exotic places. And that was the first time I'd seen punk, from the disposition of a bored white suburban kid. And that summer, I went to this Catholic school. We'd all been going to school with each other since kindergarten, so we were all kind of sick of each other. But we couldn't really fraternize. We didn't really know all the other kids in Evanston who went to the public high schools. We'd go to like the dances at the YMCA, and we'd go to the beach, and we'd try to fraternize with them. But we were just sort of these awkward dorks, and it would just never really go well. So I would, and like that summer too, like after we had rented Repo Man, we just never really returned it. So I would watch it every day. I would sort of retreat to that movie. And it got to a point where I could literally recite the movie from beginning to end. And it was like this security blanket, and it became an identity. And the soundtrack I would listen to more and more, like Institutionalized and Coup d'etat and Pablo Picasso. All these songs were really funny to me, and I always responded to humor. But there was something else growing in there too. There was this identity, and it was also this, like, as I said before, this is the first time I was really understanding punk rock from the disposition of a bored white suburban kid, and it was also the first time that I'd seen punk rock presented, alongside Hispanic music, as it was with the Repo Man soundtrack. And that's the first time I really kind of saw punk as this, like, the music of like the working class. And that's kind of what the movie Repo Man is. It's sort of this like lower middle class, working class manifesto, but also one that just doesn't really take itself seriously. And I think especially that song really kind of echoes that sentiment. Like when we see the Circle Jerks playing it in the club, when he meets Layla and her weird Fed friend with a metal hand, and Otto, he starts off, by saying, regarding the Circle Jerks, saying, "Can't believe I used to like these guys." And then he's just not taking anything seriously at that point. He's probably only there to hook up with Layla again. And then Duke, Debbie, and Archie come in, and he's clearly embarrassed by them, and they go on to just sort of, have this cliched life of like white suburban crime, and it goes awry in a liquor store, and the last thing Duke says to Otto, "I blame society for what I am." Oh, that's bullshit. You're a white suburban punk just like me. I think that's kind of the epiphany of the movie, and that's really captured in that particular version of When the Shit Hits the Fan, because the song, they're kind of listing off all these sort of harsh realities of being poor. So it's kind of this, like, that song in itself is sort of this lower class manifesto, but it's kind of making fun of, like, performance art, but it's also sort of making fun of, like, folky protest music of, like, Dylan and Guthrie, but it's also very much making fun of itself. And that's kind of is a perfect microcosm for the entire movie, because it's sort of this lower class manifesto that completely mocks the fact that it's a lower class manifesto. Repo Man was also the first time where contextually a soundtrack was so bound to the movie. A contemporary of Repo Man's, Valley Girl, a movie that came out around the same time, and takes place geographically sort of in the same region of the country, like outskirts of LA. And Valley Girl is this movie about this lower class guy who, falls for a girl from the valley, and it's sort of this sentimental tale of forbidden love. And the soundtrack is laden with like pop songs, like modern English and whatnot. But if you take Valley Girl and take Repo Man, and the movie's same plot, same everything, just as they are, but swapped soundtracks, the movies would totally swap identities. Nicolas Cage and his friend would be driving around, driving through the valley looking for her, and instead of a million miles away by the Plimsolls, they'd be listening to, Let's Have a War.
In a sluggish economy, inflation, recession hits the land of the free. Standing unemployment lines, blame the government for hard times. We just get by however we can. We all got a duck, when the shit hits the fan. 10 kids in a Cadillac stand in line for welfare checks. Let's all leech off the state. Gee, the money's really great. We just get by however we can. We all gotta duck when the shit hits the fan. Soup lines, free loaves of bread, 5-pound blocks of cheese, bags of groceries. Social security has run out on you and me. We do whatever we can. Gotta duck when the shit hits the fan. Doobity-doo wop wop, say what, yeah?
When I got the idea to premiere my radio show with Repo Man, I had no idea that the same week of the show, a cover record of Repo Man was to be released. Jeremy found out about this, and then I immediately contacted American Laundromat Records' sole employee and owner, Joe Spadaro. Joe kindly sent me an advance copy, got me in contact with Mike Watt, and also conducted an interview with me. Next up, to take place of 2 tracks, we have Matthew Sweet's cover of the Plug's cover of Secret Agent Man. In 1977, the Plugs became one of the first Chicano punk bands. Their music underscores the whole film. Then following Secret Agent Man, you will hear my interview with Joe, underscored by a track called Bad Man, which is a monologue in the movie from the character Light, played by Cy Richardson. The version you will be hearing is from Laundromat Records' release of the cover of Repo Man, the soundtrack.
Es un hombre que vive peligroso. Todo lo que hace es sombroso. Cada día que lo ve le escurre como miel. Quizás no verás en la mañana. Hombre secreto, secreto.
Born in Chicago, raised in the city streets. My mama gave me the basic facts of life.
How did this project come along, Joe? What brought you to covering the Repo Man soundtrack?
Well, this Repo Man was just like you. That movie was just always a big favorite of mine. And for years, I always had the soundtrack. And every time it would pop up in my, on my iPod, I'd be like, oh, I love this song, and then I would get out, listen to the whole soundtrack. So it's just something that I've loved for years, and just the movie and the whole scene. So it just came. I had done a tribute to 80s films a while back, mostly like the John Hughes films, having bands cover the songs that appeared like in 16 Candles, and that was the first project I ever did, and Frank Black covered Repo Man for that project, and I had always wanted to revisit the whole soundtrack because I thought it was nice and tight, only 11 songs. Love every one of his tracks on there. And
Mike says he picked the song that he did. Did you let everyone sort of choose until it got to the bare minimum, or did you choose a few of them?
No, I absolutely let everybody choose their own tracks. I just, I conceived this project 7 years ago, and I had reached out to bands, and nobody ever seemed to bite at it, and I would just put it on the back burner because I knew it was a good idea, and I really wanted to do it, but only if I got bands excited about it. And it wasn't until, I guess, the beginning of this year, I revisited it again after the Smiths tribute, and Those Darlings were like the first ones to just jump on. I said, oh my God, it's the greatest film. And they gave me like 4 songs they want to cover. I said, no, you can only cover 1. and then I reached out to Black Francis. I said, hey, and he's like, oh, I love the Plugs. I'd love to do this. And then Matthew Sweet, like 15 minutes after I contacted his manager, he's like, Matthew wants to do it. He wants to do this. And he's excited he gets to sing in Spanish. And so it was really funny how after all this time and having a few false starts that it just all fell into place. Really pleased the way it happened.
Yeah.
Same with like Amanda Palmer. I got so lucky with her. I just shot her an email one night, and like 10 minutes later, I hear back. She's like, "You don't know how lucky you are. I just saw this film in a bar in Australia, and I love this fucking movie." And she was all excited about it. And she goes, "And I'm going into the studio in 2 months, and I'm going to record my new album. And you're lucky I'm going to do it then." And she was so happy, like, that I asked her to do it, and it just went like that. I was like, "Holy Christ!" It all just like sort of fell into place quickly.
It's really interesting to have a band choose to do the Bad Man song too. Did you sort of know that this fellow would be able to pull that off?
Yeah, the funny Moses Coltrane.
Yeah.
Yeah, the funny thing about that song was at first I was thinking I wanted to have a lot of humor, and I believe it or not, I reached out to Jack Black. I was like, you know what? He would be so much fun to just like ad-lib this. I bet you he'd have a ball doing it.
Yeah,
his manager just kept saying, "All right, yeah, Jack's aware of it. I'm waiting to hear back." And I would go back and forth with them, and I was like, I try to get through to him like through other people, like friends of friends of friends that maybe knew him or their wives knew each other. You know, just trying to figure out a way to get to him. And then what I did is I have Steve Rizzo, who is in Rhode Island, and he's worked with Throwing Muses and Kristen Hirsch pretty often. He's worked with her, and I knew he would just be able to cover most of the stuff for me. So he laid down all the basic tracks, and I figured, all right, now I'll just send it to them, and I'll make his life easy. Now all Jack has to do is go into a studio and just record the vocals. So love this. And it turned out that, you know, that was just falling. So in the 11th hour, I actually went in and recorded the vocals as Moses Coltrane. Me and my daughter the name is. Yeah, so that's actually me. And I had so much fun doing it. And I'm kind of glad I did in the end, because the movie meant so much to me, and the soundtrack meant so much to me. So I really had a good time doing it. And I've gotten some nice compliments, people that never realized it was me. So I rented all these like exploitation films, like Shaft, and I was trying to get a feel, like, you know, for the character in the film. And I watched the movie a couple times, and I listened to the song, and I wanted to try to get like really be like a badass, but have like kind of like this old school badass from the late 70s, early 80s.
So is there any sort of promotion of it that you should say right now that will help the audiences find this?
Well, you know, it'll be available worldwide. iTunes worldwide, Amazon MP3, any indie rock store in the USA should be carrying it. It'll be readily available, and then through my website is probably the best way. People get little promo pins where we have these sayings from the film, like some of the real fun, like "Let's go do crimes" and "Let's go get sushi and not pay" and "Life of a Repo Man" is always intense, that kind of stuff. And then I was giving out for a while. I only have about 30 of them left. The little tree ornaments.
Yeah, I got one.
That was fun. I actually called the people that make those, and they were very, very generous. They gave me like a super like distributor cost, so because I told them I was giving them out as sort of bonus items to pre-order customers. So
hey, I actually read on one of the like trivia sites that company was their only sponsor. Do you know if that's true?
Over the years, reading, and I think I heard a little interview with Alex Cox where he said that wasn't true. That they had given them all those, you know, to use in the film, but they made them special for them without any of the scent. But I never heard that they were an actual sponsor.
Find one in every car. You'll see.
All right, Joe, I'm going to let you go.
Well, nice to talk to you. Yeah, I'm glad it worked out.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, I'm a bad man.
Joe, you are this radio show's Plato Shrimp. This last track is my favorite of the Plug songs, an instrumental explored by my partner in the Whole in 30 Days podcast, Eric T. Roth, who has recently moved to the world in which Repo Man and its music was filmed and recorded, Los Angeles. Here is Eric T. Roth bringing us back home, wherever that may be, with his take on album closer, Reel 10.
Early in Repo Man, Otto refuses a ride with Bud, calls him a fag, and walks on. By the end of the movie, Otto no longer refuses rides with men. Miller beckons him to the car with a lascivious "come hither" gesture. The girl Otto has been pursuing asks, "What about a relationship?" Otto says, fuck that, as he climbs in the 64 Chevy Malibu and literally transcends the normal world. This track, Reel 10 by the Plugs, underscores this moment. It is a beautifully queer moment for an unfortunately repressed time. I was introduced to Repo Man in 8th grade by Nick Wallen, a friend of mine since the tender age of 3. When I was 5, Nick explained the entire plot of Aladdin to me because he loved the movie so much. And when I was 12, he did the same for Repo Man. It was not long before Repo Man would be my favorite movie. This was long before I could actively relate to Otto's employment travails. Long before I myself had spent many hours of half-assedly looking for jobs that I knew I wouldn't enjoy, that would lead me in the direction of careers that I did not care for. But I could relate to sitting on a curb singing songs to myself. It was punk. It was decidedly punk, and I wanted that. I wanted that so bad.
Breaking Bad!
In 9th grade, I met Mr. O'Rourke, a math teacher with a fantastic taste in music. He would pull me out of class to lend me CDs and talk about Black Flag, The Replacements, Superchunk. He used to play bass. He owned a bass amp. Mr. O'Rourke had these stories of being a senior in high school and working at a Chuck E. Cheese. These stories were filled with general teenage antics, one of them being playing the Repo Man soundtrack while at work and watching all of the Texan moms perk up their ears at the swear words. He proposed a trade. If I could find the Repo Man soundtrack, I could trade it to him for the bass and the bass amp. This transaction occurred, and I still use that amp. This was 10 years ago, back in Chicago. Now, as of a month ago, I live in Los Angeles. According to my friend Devin out here, people love Repo Man because it's a representation of the city's life that feels more honest than the glossy fake crap that gets consumed by ordinary fucking people. Younger generations relate to the film almost 30 years after its release. Its humorous portrayal of loneliness and despair has sprawled out past the 1980s. I don't know if there's a Repo Man for my generation. In the 90s, Gregory's gay teen angst trilogy recognized the same hopelessness and sexual frustration that Repo Man had explored 10 years earlier. The LA landscape created the backdrop of a world teetering on apocalypse, but even that is almost 20 years old now. If someone has made the contemporary Repo Man, I haven't seen it. I would like to make it. I live in LA now. Give me a couple years and I will find the emptiness that has inspired those who came before me. I have ended long road trips driving into the city with this song on repeat. It is a lonely song, but it is not hopeless. We watch Otto fly away looking over the sprawl, blasting off into the distance. And we get those 2001 Space Odyssey drums kicking in at the very end.
And that is the end of Jughead's Basement. I hope you have enjoyed this journey. Tune in next month, Friday, October 19th at 10 p.m. Central, when we will be featuring one of my own records, My Brain Hurts by the band Screeching Weasel. And joining me, we will have Chicago's famous brothers Dan and Robbie Telfer, stand-up comedian Kyle Kinane, record producer Lawrence Livermore, zine writer and podcast maker Jim Testa, singer-songwriter Cody Templeman of Lillingtons and Teenage Bottle Rocket fame, and of course many, many more. Thanks for tuning in, and thanks to Jeremy and Tuesday Night Hootenanny. If you have any comments, please contact me on Facebook or at jugheadsbasement@gmail.com. This last song is from Mike Watt and the Second Men's cover of Let's Have a War. Good night from the Sleep Inn in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Let's have a war.
Thank you for listening to Jughead's Basement. Make sure to check out the other shows on the TNH network right here at TuesdayNightHoot.com.